What's up guys, Lifting here. With the patch 1.3 release, I am updating my Fireball Carpet Bomber Witch build guide. And this is a great patch for this specific build. Even though we play this as a witch, we are greatly benefiting from the reworked Templar starting area. And because of those changes, this build is now much more efficient and it has more damage and more survivability. It does however have a little less mana regeneration and we don't pick up the block nodes anymore. However, that shouldn't be a problem, since we will still be able to run Arctic Armor at such high levels, and we have plenty of life. One thing to note about Arctic Armor with this patch is that it has received a slight nerf at higher levels. The skill, however, is still very viable and provides some awesome damage mitigation. Overall though, I'm pretty happy. I feel like this build has received a buff, especially when it comes to its offensive capabilities and how much damage it's able to deal. Now, if you guys have already seen my previous 1.2 video for the Carpet Bomber build, I would suggest that you simply skip to the skill tree progression part, as nothing else besides that has changed too much. If not, then I would suggest you watch the entire video to get a better understanding of the build and how it works. So let's get started. So first of all, what is this build and who is it suited for? This build is well suited for beginners or new players to Path of Exile who seeks an effective, safe and fairly simple but fun character to begin their adventures in Bray class. Additionally, this build is viable for both softcore and hardcore gameplay and requires no specific uniques or other costly items. It fits players who seek a powerful build that can reach endgame to easily farm piety and maps to start amassing wealth. I have tested this build up and until level 74 maps, and so far these maps haven't been a problem, and the clear speed is good. The great thing about this build is that all of this can be achieved for less than 15 to 20 chaos orbs, and that is very cheap for a build that is able to do these kind of maps. And if you decide to invest some more currency, this build should easily make you able to farm the highest level maps and their bosses. This build was actually originally designed for the 1 month hardcore race in patch 1.1.5. And this was going to be my first character in that league, and that of course meant that I had no currency to invest into this build when I started out. Therefore, I wanted to create a build that was both cheap but still very effective, that would allow me to farm piety and dominance for items, as well as to take me to endgame maps. This goal was achieved and this character ended up being very safe and tanky, and it had some great damage output. I was very happy with the outcome compared to the price cost of this character. So let's get a little more specific. The strength of the build lies in having a good amount of damage and having a shit ton of mana regeneration. At my current level, I have about 286 mana regeneration per second. The combination of Eldritch Battery plus Discipline and Clarity allows us to run a level 22 plus Arctic Armor, which significantly reduces the amount of physical and fire damage that we get hit by. That, along with having capped resistances and a big life pool, is how we are able to achieve such a strong defense for this character. We have no evasion and only little armor to begin with, as in the beginning and middle of the game you will want to stack energy shield on your gear for it to be converted to mana through Eldritch Battery. Later on in the game, when we have enough mana and mana regen to sustain Arctic Armor through both our skill tree and abilities, you should start using some hybrid armor and energy shield gear to further bolster your defenses. For anyone who doesn't understand how Arctic Armor works, let me give you a little rundown, as this is important for this build to work. Arctic Armor reduces a flat amount of physical and fire damage when activated, but it also drains our mana and even more when moving. For that reason, the most important thing to make Arctic Armor work at higher levels is to have sufficient mana regeneration to be able to sustain it. Arctic Armor is very efficient at reducing both physical and fire damage, and just like regular armor, it is very strong against small frequent hits such as attacks from monkeys, sea witches and even the dreaded titty bitches in the Lunaris Temple. I should note that if you experience taking too much damage from these mobs, then it is simply because you need to further level up your Arctic Armor. Arctic Armor really starts to shine around level 13 and 15. Before that, it seems a little weak, but you'll have to see that for yourself. It does, however, have one weakness. It is not very strong against the slow, really heavy-hitting monsters, as this flat damage reduction that it provides simply isn't enough. We do, however, have a method of keeping us safe from that as well, but I will get into that later on in the video. And as you can see in this picture, a level 20 Arctic Armor requires at the minimum 230 mana regenerated per second to be able to sustain this skill. Throughout this build guide I will explain how we, with the use of certain auras, skill nodes and gear affixes, are able to achieve this. Reflect damage is absolutely no problem with this build. The reason for that is that all of our damage comes from fire, and since we're running Arctic Armor and the Purity of Fire aura, which both gives us a lot of additional fire resistance and a flat reduction of incoming fire damage, we hardly feel any reflected damage. You can easily do elemental reflect maps on this character as long as your Arctic Armor is leveled high enough and you have your Purity of Fire aura activated. For damage we are, as some of you probably already have guessed, using Fireball. And for you new players, let me just quickly explain how the Fireball mechanic works. Fireball deals damage in two ways: when the projectile hits, and then additionally when the projectile explodes. The projectile alone will not do any area of effect or AoE damage, but the explosion will, and because of that we're therefore able to hit more than one enemy at a time. The best way to make Fireball deal lots of damage for our specific build is to focus on making that explosion damage as high as possible. I should note that you can't really trust the tooltip for Fireball. The tooltip only shows you the projectile damage, and since we're focusing on the explosion damage and using both the skill gems and skill nodes to further boost the damage of the explosion damage, the output of our Fireball is a lot higher than what the tooltip states, so just ignore the tooltip. You can't trust that. For damage you'll be using a Fireball linked with greater multiple projectiles, concentrated effect, fire penetration and spell echo. Concentrated effect will greatly increase the explosion damage. Fire penetration will, to put it simply, increase your overall damage by reducing the resistances of the monsters, and spell echo will greatly increase your casting speed. Greater multiple projectiles will allow you to shoot out additional Fireball projectiles that all has their own projectile and explosion damage. When multiple of these explosions goes off, we end up dealing a lot more damage, which easily makes up for the reduction of projectile damage that greater multiple projectile is responsible for. If you don't have the mana to sustain a greater multiple projectile skill gem, I recommend using a lesser multiple projectiles skill gem until you do. An additional awesome bonus of using either lesser multiple or greater multiple projectiles is that if you position yourself correctly, you'll be able to shotgun the enemy. This basically means that you're able to hit the same target with more than just one projectile and explosion at a time. By holding shift and placing the cursor further behind your target, the fireballs will, as demonstrated here, fly out in a smaller cone, and thus making you able to hit the same target with more than one fireball at a time. This is great for boss farming and single target damage, and for instance hitting Piety with 6 fireballs multiple times will bring her down pretty fast. If you only have a 4-linked armor, you can leave out the fire penetration skill gem. I do however highly recommend getting yourself a cheap 5-linked energy shield armor. I got mine for 6 chaos orbs, so it can be obtained fairly cheap, and with the new changes to crafting, it should not be too hard to obtain, and it makes a huge difference in damage output having that fire penetration skill gem as well. For curses you'll be using flammability linked with increased area of effect. Flammability basically works by reducing the resistances of the mobs you are attacking and further increasing the radius of your AoE damage explosion from your fireballs. For defense we're using Arctic Armor, and Arctic Armor doesn't really have any specific skill gems that it needs to be linked with. The only really powerful thing it can be linked with is Empower, so if you can obtain that, that's good. If not, it really isn't that important, not until late game that is. For additional defense we're also incorporating a cast when damage taken setup. For this specific build we're using cast when damage taken, Enduring Cry, Increased Duration and Immortal Call. This cast when damage taken setup is there to help us out in specific situations where our Arctic Armor and armor simply isn't sufficient in reducing the incoming physical damage. As mentioned earlier, Arctic Armor is a powerful and very strong defensive skill, but its main weakness is those really heavy hitting mobs and bosses such as the Colossal Bone Stalkers for instance, and a boss like Brutus. If being hit by these attacks, this cast when damage taken setup will then proc Immortal Call, which will make us immune to physical damage for a few seconds and then allows us to move away to safer grounds. Since we only want our cast when damage taken set up to proc when taking those big spikes of damage, I recommend leveling your cast when damage taken skill gem to level 9, Enduring Cry to level 10, Immortal Call to level 9, and since Increased Duration is a support skill gem, it can be leveled to level 20. For this build we are running 3 auras. These are Purity of Fire, Clarity and Discipline. All of these auras should be linked to reduced mana. Purity of Fire, as mentioned earlier, is important for this setup, as it will not only make us take less fire damage from enemies, it will also greatly help us against reflected elemental damage. And as an additional bonus, it will make the gearing process cheaper, as you won't need as much fire resistance on gear as you will get that through the aura. Clarity and Discipline are 2 of the main components that allows us to run Arctic armor at high levels. Clarity is fairly simple to understand, it simply gives us a flat increase in mana regeneration. Discipline is a little more complicated. To understand how this works to give us more mana regeneration, I need to explain how Eldritch Battery works. Eldritch Battery is a keynote fairly close to the Witch starting area in the skill tree. It works by converting all your existing energy shield to mana. Your mana regeneration rate percentage is based on your total maximum number of your mana pool, and that of course means that the higher your total mana pool is, the more mana you're going to regenerate per second. The Discipline aura works by adding a flat amount of energy shield, and with Eldritch Battery, this energy shield is converted to and added to our total mana pool. To put it simple, the Discipline aura will, in combination with Eldritch Battery, increase our total mana pool and, as a byproduct, increase our mana regeneration rate, and thus leaving us able to run Arctic armor on a higher level. And this makes a significant difference. For extra mobility, we're incorporating Lightning Warp linked with reduced duration and faster casting, and remember that Arctic armor drains mana faster when moving or running. If you use Lightning Warp to move around, that is not going to happen. It will only drain your mana as if you were standing still. The last skill gem setup is optional, but I highly recommend it, as it will increase your survivability and clearing speed a lot when you learn to use this properly. The setup is a spell totem linked with Summon Skeletons, faster casting and blind. Casting this totem before engaging a mob pack will result in the enemy mobs attacking the skeletons instead of you, which leaves you free to cast your fireballs from a safe distance. It basically creates decoys for you. This setup is also great for fighting the less mobile bosses such as Brutus, as the skeletons will swarm him and blind him. This of course makes it a lot safer and results in you being able to position yourself and therefore killing stuff faster. So how do you level this character? Well, if you want, you can use Fireball straight from the beginning. However, until Fireball gets linked with either lesser multiple or greater multiple projectiles, it isn't too effective. For this build, since it has so much casting speed and spell damage, I personally recommend using Ice Nova linked with added lightning damage for the first 24 levels. When reaching level 24, pick up a Searing Bond totem and link your Fireball with lesser multiple projectiles. Lesser multiple projectiles can be obtained by completing the Sharp and Cruel quest on normal difficulty in Act 2. From there on, simply keep using your Fireball and Searing Bond totem. At some point it will be a lot more efficient for you to cast additional Fireballs instead of placing your Searing Bond totem. When that happens, simply stop using Searing Bond. And I should mention that when leveling, you are going to experience a big improvement when adding in Concentrated Effect and Spell Echo, so try to get these as early on as possible. Alright, so let's head over to the skill tree, guys, and let me show you how I would suggest you level this character. Keep in mind, the things that we're looking for is things such as life, obviously, to get our life pool up. We are looking for increased maximum mana and mana regeneration to be able to sustain our Arctic armor, and for offensive capabilities, we're looking for things such as spell damage, elemental damage, fire damage, cast speed, and so on. So, the way I would start this is by picking up this energy shield and mana regeneration node. After that, I'm gonna pick up the spell damage, cast speed, and then head into elemental dominion for that nice cast speed and elemental damage with spells. After that, I would suggest you head through this direction where you pick up Firewalker and then into this area where we're gonna pick up Cruel Preparation for some increased maximum life. After you've picked up Cruel Preparation, I would suggest you head through this direction where you pick up Blast Radius to increase the explosion area of effect and damage of your fireball. Then pick up Deep Wisdom for the mana and energy shield and intelligence, and then pick up Heart and Soul. Pick up the last life and mana node here as well. After you have done that, I would suggest heading out towards the Templar area by going in this direction, where you are going to pick up Agility for the 32 Dexterity. But keep in mind, if you don't need the Dexterity at the moment, you can just save it for later and pick it up when you need it. But we're gonna pick it up now. When you've picked up Agility, I would go in this direction, pick up Purity of Flesh along with the life skill notes here, and then head down towards this nice Light of Divinity notable that will give you increased spell damage and cast speed. It will also give you some light radius, but that's, you know, minor. The 10+ to strength and intelligence is nice as well, especially the strength, as it will make gearing and leveling up skills easier. When you've picked up Light of Divinity, pick up this cast speed node here and head down into Elementalist. For the 12 to all elemental resistances, 10% increased elemental damage and 5 chance to freeze, shock and ignite. Now keep in mind, this is not an ignite build, but it's still a nice bonus. When you've picked up Elementalist, I would suggest you pick up Amplify for even more explosion radius of your fireball, but also for the explosion damage. After you've picked up Amplify, pick up the other area of effect node here, and then pick up Retribution for the increased spell damage, increased attack and cast speed, and strength and intelligence. Then pick up this life node and discipline and training, and continue down towards Sanctity for the increased armor, maximum energy shield, and life regeneration per second. The nice thing about Sanctity is that it increases your maximum energy shield, and as you know, as we've talked about, energy shield will be converted through Eldritch Battery. So the more energy shield you have, the more mana you're gonna get and the easier you can sustain your Arctic armor. When you've picked up Sanctity, I would suggest you go in this direction where you're gonna pick up these life nodes here along with Devotion for the increased maximum life, 5% increased effect of buffs on you, and 20+ to strength. The nice thing about Devotion is that not only will the 20+ to strength make gearing and leveling up skills easier, but the 5% increased effect of buffs scales with Arctic armor. So your Arctic armor will actually run more powerful with this skill node. Just keep in mind that anytime you buff the effect of Arctic armor, the mana drain will also become higher. So if you don't know why your mana is being drained too fast, even though you should have enough mana to sustain your Arctic armor, at least in the tooltip, then you know why you need to spec out of this. After you've picked up Devotion, pick up the other life node here and then head into elemental damage here. The thing we want in here is Celestial Judgment for the 20% increased elemental damage and the fire penetration. And in order to get here, we don't want to pick up these are inefficient compared to the cost. Instead, we're going to pick up these 12% increased fire damage nodes and then Celestial Judgment. Now you can pick up Celestial Punishment if you feel like it. As I said, this is not an ignite build, so the 30% increased damage against frozen, shocked or ignite enemies will only happen sometimes. It's only going to happen when you actually ignite an enemy. But you will be igniting enemies from time to time, so it's up to you if you feel like it's worth it. It's a very nice notable, but for this build I'm not gonna pick it up by default. You'll have to experiment with that. After you've done that, I would suggest you head back towards the Witch direction, where we're gonna continue in this direction. If you need the Dexterity at that moment, pick up Agility or Alacrity as it is called over here. And if you need Strength, you can pick up Physique as well. Optimally, you will want to spec out of these later on in the game, when you get enough Dexterity and Strength on your gear. But if you need them for now, just pick them up, there's no harm done in that. Then head down in this direction, where you're gonna pick up Written in Blood for the 8% increased maximum life, 10% increased maximum energy shield, and 10+ to strength. And of course these life and energy shield notables here. And once again, remember that energy shield will be converted so that your maximum mana pool will be higher, and in that way you will be able to regenerate more mana and be able to sustain your Arctic armor at the higher levels. At this point in time, I would suggest that you start transitioning into Eldritch Battery and convert all your energy shield that you have from your gear and from your skill tree into mana. So we're gonna pick up Eldritch Battery. When you have picked up Eldritch Battery, I would suggest that you head back towards this direction and pick up these Aura skill notes over here. Sovereignty, along with the 2 reduced mana reservation skill notes here, will leave your character able to will leave your character able to run Purity of Fire, Discipline, and Clarity all at the same time, which is necessary for the build to be able to sustain Arctic Armor and to reduce incoming reflect damage. Also, I would suggest at this point in time that your Arctic Armor is at least leveled till about level 12 or so. If not, be very careful when you progress. To help your character sustain your Arctic Armor, we need mana regeneration, and there's 3 really good skill nodes here that I would suggest you pick up along with this life and mana skill node here. These skill nodes will all give you 20% increased mana regeneration rate and 0.4 life regenerated per second. So, very nice for our build. The next thing we're going to do is to pick up these skill nodes here for life and mana regeneration, along with the notable quick recovery that will give us 6% increased maximum life and 20% increased mana regeneration rate and 0.8 of life regenerated per second. Very nice. After that, I would suggest you head towards the shadow part of the skill tree and then pick up Cold-Hearted Calculation for the increased spell damage, mana regeneration, and intelligence. We obviously don't care about the 12% increased melee damage. After that, head through this direction, pick up Blaze for the 12% increased fire damage and chance to ignite, and then head into Trickery for the increased elemental damage, intelligence, and critical strike chance. Now this is not a crit build, so it doesn't matter too much, but it's still a nice bonus to get that increased critical strike chance. After you've picked up Trickery, I would suggest you pick up Blood Siphon for the 12% increased maximum life, and then the other life node, and down into Coordination for the increased cast speed and dexterity. At this point in time, I would suggest you pick up some more damage, so we're gonna head back towards the Witch starting area and pick up this intelligence node, and then pick up these fire damage skill nodes. And then finally pick up Heart of Flame for the 25% increased fire damage, and the damage penetrates 3% of fire resistances. Very nice. When you have picked up Path of Flame, I would suggest that you pick up Deep Thoughts as well. And you should only pick this up if you have trouble with regenerating enough mana to be able to sustain your Arctic Armor. If you don't have any trouble with that, there's no reason to pick it up, but if you do have trouble with it, this is a very good node that will help you to be able to sustain that high level Arctic Armor. So we're gonna select this skill node. After that, I would suggest you pick up these Flask effect nodes here, along with Alchemist. And now I know that flask nodes doesn't sound too interesting, but trust me, they make a huge difference. Your life flasks will become much more potent, but more importantly, the granite flask that I suggest you run for this build will become so much better. You'll be able to reach about 50 to 60% increased physical damage reduction alone with the granite flask when you pick up these Alchemist flask nodes. So I would highly suggest you do that. You can even do this before this point in time, so if you're feeling squishy, pick up these flask nodes as soon as you have a granite flask. After we've picked up Alchemist, we're going down towards this direction again, where we're gonna pick up Shaper, and then lastly, Inner Force. Shaper is gonna give us that mana regeneration rate and some life regeneration, and Inner Force, just as Devotion, will increase the effect of buffs on us. So basically it will make our Arctic Armor much stronger. We will receive a total of 21% increased buff effects from this skill cluster. That is not to be underestimated. Now keep in mind that if you're lacking dexterity and strength, you can always pick up these skill nodes here, along with the skill nodes over here. Also there's the option of picking up this practical application for some additional strength and dexterity, but as I said, optimally you want to get enough strength and dexterity on your gear to be able to run the build without having to pick up any of these skill nodes. But it's gonna be hard in the beginning, so don't be afraid to pick them up and then spec out of them later. And that's it for the skill tree, guys. Now let's talk about some gearing stuff. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is what kind of affixes and stats you should aim for on your gear for your character. And let's quickly summarize what this build needs to function and prosper. Well, we need life and resistances so that we don't die. We also need enough mana regeneration to sustain a high level Arctic Armor, and we also need fire, elemental, and spell damage to increase the damage of a fireball to kill stuff. And let me just mention, when reaching Merciless, there is no longer an excuse for not being resistance capped. If you're not by this time, go fix it. When you are resistance capped, this is the stats in priority you should aim for when changing gear. For defensive stats, we want life as the main priority. Secondly, we want energy shield and armor. Thirdly, we want mana regeneration. And lastly, we want intelligence, mana and chaos resistance. Until you're able to sustain a high-leveled Arctic armor, energy shield is more important than armor, as that energy shield along with Eldritch Battery will boost your total mana to increase your mana regeneration. But as soon as you have enough energy shield to sustain a level 22 plus Arctic armor, then you should of course try to get some armor energy shield hybrid gear for even more defense. For offensive stats, we want fire damage and elemental damage as our first priority. Secondly, we want spell damage, and the reason spell damage isn't among the first priority is that spell damage does not add to the burning damage that we sometimes will get with this build. Thirdly, we want cast speed, and lastly we want critical hit chance and critical hit multiplier as the least important offensive stats. And lastly, I can't stress this enough, listen up guys. It is very important for us to use a granite flask. A granite flask along with the flask effect skill nodes are going to provide you with a ton of armor, and this should not be underestimated. It will make a huge difference in your survivability. If you want to invest some more currency into this build, I will in my forum post link to a few uniques and specific items that goes really well with this build. It is however not something we're going to discuss in this video. Oh, and lastly, for the bandit quest rewards you should Hellboat on normal for the additional 40 life and then kill them all on cruel and merciless to get that additional 2 skill points. And that's actually it guys. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them below in the comments or by going to my forum post on the Path of Exile forums. I will make sure to answer any questions that haven't already been answered in this video. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd? Mm-hmm.